Hi and welcome. My name is Mike Wright. I am the president and CEO of ODL Orthodontic Laboratory. And this is our first go at what we're doing is expert interviews for the ORG, the Orthodontic Resource Group. Today, we're starting out with our first guest here, Tim Torbenson. I have personally worked with Tim with all of the regulatory things that we're doing at ODL, and we wanted to have him as our first guest because we feel what he has to bring to the table is something that all of us are looking at or dealing with when it comes to regulation and the FDA. So I'm super excited to be interviewing Tim. Tim, welcome.
Well, thank you to be here. I appreciate the invite and the opportunity to speak.
So I'll give a brief bio. So Tim Torbenson, Tim is a diverse experience with medical device manufacturing, materials management, and regulatory affairs spanning 45 years. Tim is also engaged in the development of 9 medical device systems through design, production, and their regulatory processes. He has experience with and involved in 10 FDA audits with clients and brings his regulatory experiences from Attachment International, Glidewell Dental Labs, and most recently Integrated Dental Systems Megagen. And he is also the current president of Evo 820. So you got a lot of background here, which is great. So why don't we start off by talking about Evo 820, and I'd love to get some backstory on your company, what you do, and how it got started.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. And as you just read off, my most recent corporate experience was with Integrated Dental Systems, where they were the Megagen distributor in the United States, and I was working with them on several 510Ks to get them through the FDA. And during that time, those communications with the FDA gave me a very clear picture of where the FDA was going to be headed with regard to what I would consider to be new regulatory requirements for dental laboratories, or specifically CAD/CAM dental laboratories or laboratories involved with manufacturing Class II devices. And as I became aware of that, I realized that there are very few options out there for dental laboratories or orthodontic laboratories to find someone to help support them in the development of a quality system, or to get registered, or when to get registered, or when not to be registered, to have those answers. And that being my background, I quit my corporate job and started Evo 820. And the reason I did that is kind of somewhat of I explained, but where the name comes from is what we do is we help dental laboratories and orthodontic laboratories evolve into compliance with the Code of Federal Regulation 820. So we help them evolve into compliance to 820 or Evo 820. So that's where our name came from. It confuses people all the time, but then so does the FDA. So we're in the right group. So
ain't that the truth?
Yes, it is. Because this is one of the things that I experience every day when I talk to the dental laboratories. They're just dazed and confused. And I'm hoping today, or we start today, with having an opportunity to really clear up these issues that they face that give them the dazed to confused situation.
I agree. When we first started going down this journey, looking at the 510K clearance for our aligners, it is incredibly intimidating. The process is arduous. So there's some definite business considerations that every laboratory has to make. But of course, I think this is going to be the first step of one device that a lab makes, and I only think it's going to become more regulated. So I think this is a really good time for us to be chatting about this. And there's so many, the FDA is evolving as well, in good or bad ways when it comes to doing business. So I have a couple questions we'll start with.
Sure.
And so let's start with, we've been talking about something called the 510K. So what is the 510K, and do I need it as an orthodontic laboratory owner or a dental lab owner?
Okay, so what is the 510K clearance? And it's important to note that the FDA has this process. It's called the 510K process, and it helps a dental laboratory achieve a clearance for a specific device that they intend to market. And it's not an approval. So the only thing because I hear occasionally, or we will hear occasionally, that people will say, I have 510K approval or FDA approval, and that doesn't exist except for drugs. So, and it's important to separate the two, because a 510K clearance demonstrates that the product that you intend to market, you have to demonstrate substantial equivalence to an existing marketed device. So this is like, we'll take the aligners, for example. It's going to be an important part of our discussion today, is that, yes, there's a number of different aligners on the marketplace. And if you want to bring yours to the market, you need to demonstrate to the FDA through a series of tests and processes and documentation that it is identical to, it is as safe as other devices that are being legally marketed. And that's what a 510K clearance does. It gets you through that validation, that the safety and efficacy being demonstrated. And then for that process achieved, the FDA will give you a 510K clearance, and that's permanent. It never expires. It is always with you once you achieve it.
So regarding a dental laboratory or orthodontic laboratory, let's get into what are the appliances that may require a 510K. You know, I guess the question as a lab owner is, am I already making appliances that require one? Or what appliances will require one? For example, anything having to do with CAD/CAM or aligners or sleep or TMJ.
So anytime, we can talk about this in maybe a little different application, is that if we look at aligners, and which do require a 510K, the manufacturing process for the aligner is literally identical to a mouth guard or a retainer, where the post-orthodontic treatment retainer is the same, thermoformed. Usually it is CAD/CAM designed and delivered to the patient, and it's the same material, same. The difference between the two, and this is how we have to look at the devices, is that the aligner is an active device. And the FDA understands that using a directional, gentle pressure, it orthodontically moves the teeth. That is an active device. And that is what needs to be incorporated in the 510K, that it does that as all of the other devices do that are on the marketplace, and it's just substantially equivalent. If we look at the retainer or the mouth guard, utilizing the same manufacturing process, there is no activity with it. It basically protects the teeth in the position. There's no activity, there's no movement, there's no claim that it does anything but cover the teeth and not move them. So that is a class 1 device because of that classification differential. So if we look at the devices, for example, in orthodontics, if you're doing any of the appliances and you're hand making them, they are under the exemption. So literally, regardless of what they are, with the exception of sleep appliances, because they're active, they're exempt from any FDA involvement. So as you get into devices like orthodontic appliances or aligner appliances, and you get into sleep appliances that are active, that there's claims associated with those, then the FDA wants you to demonstrate that they are achieving that claim. Anything else in orthodontics? Very few. And let me kind of go back to the CAD/CAM issue, because you had mentioned, if we get into the CAD/CAM process, does that mean that we have to have a quality system? And the answer to that in general is no. So if you are doing your scanning of your impressions, or you receive an intraoral scan, and from that you print your models, because that device, that model never gets into the patient's head, it's not permanently implanted, or it's not an appliance itself that gets into the patient's head, then there is no quality requirements for that application or that process of printing a model. No involvement. As soon as you get into the situation where you print that model and it becomes part of the manufacturing process of active devices like aligners or sleep appliances, then that's when the FDA steps in. So it's kind of along those lines we're always looking at.
So I have a couple follow-up questions here, just to get some
Sure.
clarity, because I already know what laboratories are thinking right now. Okay, so for example, we do expanders in the laboratory. We solder them together. They're one process, they're handmade. They are active appliances. They open up a patient's skull essentially by breaking the suture and changing the structure of a patient's face. We don't need any 510K we don't need any 510K clearance on that at all. Why would an expander not be covered under that? Is that covered under the exemption initially?
You made a couple important points there. One is it's handmade. If you are manufacturing that in your laboratory, following the handmade processes that you've been doing for many, many years, it falls under that exemption. And this is where the FDA hasn't settled yet, because as we know, there's technologies that are evolving where these devices are being designed in a CAD system, and then they're being metal sinter printed. And now that you say, well, that takes us into automated manufacturing, and the FDA should jump in on that. But the FDA has yet to make any particular movements there. And let me explain what the difference is. And this is where it gets even a little more confusing. Is that device that you have been hand making, where you have been waxing, casting, soldering, whatever you've been doing with that device. And I'm more of a restorative dental background. I got implant background. So on that one, I'm familiar with it, but I'm not too sure with your manufacturing processes. But here we go. The way the FDA has classified that years ago, when that device was being manufactured at the bench by hand, they gave it a specific classification, a product code. And when the processes have since evolved into a more CAD/CAM in manufacturing process or automated manufacturing process, it is already under that existing code, which falls under the exemption. So the only way that the FDA can come back now and change that appliance's classification is to go back and create a new product code for the automated manufactured appliance. Okay, so they can do that, but it would take a completely different process of going in and creating a new product code only because and only for those that are automated manufacturing. And that hasn't occurred yet. And we're starting to see the FDA make some moves as they become more familiar with certain procedures are moving from handmade under the exemption into automated manufacturing, where they're starting to watch those, but no action has been taken yet.
Okay.
I hope did I clear that, or did I make that like
no,
clear as
no,
mud?
that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
And I guess the big distinction is that the product already exists. And I would assume that aligners, it's a newer technology and did not exist and didn't have a classification until it was classified probably in the 90s. And then at that point it's classified as a class 2 medical device,
That's correct,
which
yes.
again needed the 510K to market. Okay, so thank you for that, because that's something that's affecting all of us, because we're now 3D printing splints. We 3D print metal sintered appliances, as you said. And I know there's quite a few questions on, can I do this, or what's going to be happening, or should I wait? So right now it's gray, so business as usual until the FDA says otherwise. Yes. Regarding some of the metal sintering. Okay, perfect. So let's look at a process, maybe not a process as much as a way to offer aligners under something called contract manufacturing. And maybe you can give us an idea of what the difference is being a contract manufacturer and the holder of a 510K. And then how do we maybe have the opportunity to sell aligners without actually getting the 510K?
Okay, so, and there is an additional process, it's called a relabeler and repackager. So there are 3 options that you have to do this legally. And as you stated, it was the 510K process, where you work with a consultant like myself. We get a 510K for you for your own branded aligner. That's one. We kind of discussed the process enough probably. And so The other one is a contract manufacturer. And this would take us similar to the process with sleep appliances. So if you're working with Airway Technologies, you sign an agreement with them that you become a contract manufacturer to manufacture their sleep appliances as under their 510K. To do that, you must follow the process and procedures, materials, and the instructions that are detailed in their 510K that they receive clearance from the FDA. So the 510K holder will create that relationship with you, and you will need to validate to them, the 510K holder, that you're using the same materials that they detail, if any, in their 510K, and that you follow the processes, and they will do an evaluation process validation process with you where you manufacture a series of aligners and send it to them. Or if it's sleep appliances, same process. You create a couple and you send it to them, and they will confirm that you're following the appropriate processes. And then you in your laboratory can then manufacture that sleep appliance or that aligner under a contract manufacturer and move forward, but it's branded under the 510K holder's name. So in your situation, if it's the Vivid aligner, it would be marketed, it would be delivered with the ODL Vivid labeling, instructions, branding. So that is still involved with that relationship. From a regulatory point of view, you do need to have a quality system implemented where you are documenting all the processes to demonstrate that you are following all of the instructions in the 510K that is held by the original manufacturer. And you have to have be registered with the FDA to demonstrate and list all those products, and you're demonstrating that you're acting as a contract manufacturer. So that's one step. And that's probably the most commonly used because it's a very quick and easy way in. The second one, as a relabeler and repackager, is another relationship where you would have a contractual agreement where you become a pass-through. So the laboratory itself would receive the RX under their name and receive impressions or would receive an intraoral scan. And they would then send that off to a 510K holder who would manufacture it 100%. They do the design, they do the manufacturing. But when they deliver it back, they deliver it in the dental laboratory's branding. So if it's ODL doing it for Tim Torbenson's Ortho Lab, I would receive that in the packaging of Tim Torbenson's Ortho Lab from ODL. It's another option that you have, but it holds the same requirements from the regulatory that you must have a quality system, you must operate that quality under that quality system, and you must register with the FDA.
So is the main difference having to do with the labeling or the white labeling? So if a lab were to essentially resell an aligner product under their name, that kind of triggers them to have to register with the FDA. Are they able to sell the product without their labeling and still have to register with the FDA at that point? Or does it become just a reseller situation and there isn't a need for a laboratory to do the registration and maintain the QAMS system? They're just selling it.
Yeah, so in the white label situation where it's, they are not involved in the manufacturing at all, but they're branding it under their laboratory name. That's what that activates the quality system and the FDA registration. To your point, the other option is really to not be involved at all, where you receive a case and you pass that on to ODL or another orthodontic laboratory who's a 510K holder, and they manufacture it. They do all of the case design, processing, manufacturing, packaging, and then that comes back to the original laboratory and it comes back in the 510K holder's branding, materials, instructions for use, all of that is still going back to the original 510(k) holder and manufacturer. So then the laboratory becomes what we refer to as a pass-through. They don't design it. They just basically collect it, send it to the manufacturer, get it back, and then deliver it to the dentist or the patient. In that case, there is no regulatory involved. They're only doing a pass-through from a registration point of view, but there is a requirement for a quality system because they are responsible for post-delivery surveillance, so to speak. So that's when it gets into having a quality system light, and it's extremely light, where the only thing that you're doing is keeping track of any customer complaints that come in, which is post-market surveillance.
Great. And I think this is a good segue into the next question, which is we've been using the acronym QMS, but what is a QMS? And as a laboratory, do I need one?
Yeah. And it really comes down to all of the activities that we've just described. If you are in the environment that you've been in for many years prior, and you've never even thought of the FDA, because you had that exemption in place, you do not need a quality management system. So what is going to trigger the reason to implement a quality system? So let's say, for example, if you incorporate just scanners and you get your impressions in, you pour up the model, you scan it, then you design orthodontic traditional cases, you manufacture them by hand, you are still, even though you've gone to a portion of the CAD/CAM technology, more the CAD, less the CAM, it is not required that you have a quality system in that situation. As soon as you step up into either manufacturing, becoming a contract manufacturer, or become a repackager, relabeler, then you need to step it up to have a quality system and register. So a quality system it's just an organizational structure where there are the standard operating procedures, and the standard operating procedures say what you are going to do to assure a consistent quality manufacturing process or good manufacturing practices, GMP. And so the SOPs state that. The next level down is the work instructions. And the work instructions now go to the bench area where you say, this is what the technician does to assure the quality on each of the appliances that only are under the quality system. So if you're over here and you're doing your expanders, or palatal expanders, they're not involved in the quality system. It's only going to be the appliances that are the class 2s. So it's not throughout the laboratory, it is department specific and appliance specific. That's all you need to document. Then the next level down is the quality forms. And those are the actual forms where you record the activities. For example, if you are going to calibrate a scanner, you document that you did it today at 12 o'clock, and Tim Torbenson would initial it saying that I did the calibration of that device. If it's a printer, you would document that you cleaned out the internal chamber to be able to replace the resin and make certain that it's clean and operating at its highest efficiency and meeting the specifications. So those are the kinds of things that you do on a regular basis anyway. Now it's just a check off that you have completed those procedures to satisfy the FDA. The next step, and we just slightly touched on it, is the importance of customer complaints. And a quality system provides you with a organized form that eliminates these complaints that aren't relevant to the quality of the product. So for example, we refer to them as external complaints. And this is probably one of the most important aspects of the quality system. So if you and you've had this, you've experienced this in your laboratory where you've received an impression and you pour up the models, you scan it, and you create the case to that per the RX and you deliver it. And then the doctor comes back and says, it was nowhere close to fitting the patient. But you look at it and it says, it perfectly fits on my model. What's going on? That's not your fault. Okay, that means the impression came in, or even a scan can come in and be distorted. So you built your case to the data that you received, the specifications that you received. You hit your target. That's not your fault. That is not a type of a complaint that is documented. And unfortunately, they happen a lot, but that's not the one where you spend your time documenting those cases or do the evaluations. The ones that will concern the FDA and should concern you are those that we refer to as internal complaints, where there's something that went through. You read the RX, you created the case, but you missed something, or some of your personnel aren't properly trained and didn't do the quality level that you expect, or the patient, the client expected. Something went wrong internally. That's the one that the FDA wants you to evaluate, investigate, and finalize and close to find out what happened. And that's probably the most important part of the quality system. And for a laboratory, this is actually a good exercise because it gives you some really good transparency and some vision as to what's taking place in your laboratory by looking at the complaints and the evaluations that you made to determine the cause. And then you can probably see maybe someone needs more training. Maybe that particular device is wearing out and it needs to be replaced. Something like this will bubble up. So that sounds like a lot, but in reality, these are all the things you're doing in your laboratory anyway. It's just documenting them and then giving yourself the view of what's taking place in your laboratory.
Okay, so we know that we need a QMS system. It's beneficial whether or not we have a 510K for any of the products. But what I want to talk about too is if we do decide to go down the road of acquiring the 510K for aligners or anything else that requires one, what is the cost associated with doing that, and what is the process that we should expect?
Okay, that's great. So, and it's a fee that is really appliance or device specific. So, for example, if I stick with the appliances that we've discussed, aligners and sleep appliances, and with aligners, because it's relatively straightforward, and the way the FDA kind of determines the amount of sophistication and requirements to satisfy the FDA with a certain appliance is they review the risk to the patient. And Michael, you made a point to this, that they're always looking to make sure that the patient is with the patient's safety, that they're always safe utilizing an appliance. And it's very low with aligners. We don't kill people. Unlike a pacemaker stopping, that patient has a really negative effect. An aligner, if it causes pain, it can simply be removed. So the FDA, recognizing that, has a pretty straightforward process within the 510K process for an aligner. And it is demonstrating a couple different things, that you're following the processes in your manufacturing, and you do a flow chart for them of what you do in your laboratory in manufacturing the appliance from start to finish, which CAD system you're using, which sheet material you're using for the thermal forming. This type of information needs to be presented to the FDA and how you're doing it. And then there's some simple biological testing, which is endotoxin tests, to demonstrate that there's no contamination of the appliance during its manufacturing. So let me get into the cost on that from the top down. Most dental laboratories, well, I would say probably 90% of the orthodontic laboratories we're talking to today qualify for a small business classification, which is important because the fee to submit a 510K to the FDA is $13,108. So yes, $13,108. If or when, I will say, because the requirement there is if you're doing less than $100 million in revenue a year, you would classify as a small business. And then that fee drops down to $1,300 and change. I can't remember exactly what the dollar is off the top of my head. So that, let's just call it $1,400. That's the fee to the FDA to accept your 510K, review it, and then give you a clearance. The testing for the biologics is about $800 and takes about a week, and you do 3 samples that are post-production to demonstrate that they're clean when they finally get to the dentist and to the patient, into the patient's head. So that's $700. The most expensive portion of it is the gathering of the information, which was what we do. We collect the information, we compile it appropriately in a very formulaic way that the FDA has to receive it. And we gather all the information. We ask you all the questions pertaining the information that the FDA will want. And for that, we charge $30,000. So that's the big part. But that, again, is a one-time fee that you need to address. And once you are cleared, then it is done. The sleep appliances will be a little bit more, maybe closer to $40,000. And the reason for that is there's quite a bit more explaining regarding the TMJ condition, how you move the mandible forward, how you stabilize it, a lot more involvement in explaining that device. And of course, the submission fees are the same, and the biological fees are the same too, because it's a post-production endotoxin testing.
So,
did I cover all of that? There's so much.
I think so. There's
Huh?
so much that goes into it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there's a ton of questions, good questions that some of the lab owners are asking themselves right now. So I just wanted to end it at that point, if we could. Tim, I want to thank you for taking the time. It was incredibly informative. And I think the FDA and the regulations, it hits all of us to some degree, and who knows what the future holds. But if anybody does want to get a hold of you, or if they have any questions pertaining this, how can folks get a hold of you?
Well, of course, I can be reached on my phone, and that number is area code 916-844-5267. My email is just my name in front of the name of our company, which is tim.torbenson@evo820.com. Also, if you go on the site, if you go to news and under compliance news, there's an article, 2 articles that I've written there that are available at the present time. And then my contact information is also there. And as the FDA continues to change, for example, our conversation on expanders and the movement to automated manufacturing and the potential of a product classification change, always be looking at that, or be contacting us, because if that FDA modification changes, it's going to show up on the website. I'll continually be feeding that. So I would look forward to talking to anybody. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us, and I'll be happy to address anything that you may have.
Wonderful. Tim, thank you very much. I want to thank all the laboratories for watching, and hopefully this was informative as being part of the Orthodontic Resource Group. You can visit us at orthodonticresource.com and reach out to us if you have any questions. Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you for the invite, and goodbye.